Greetings, salutations, respect, and love. I am Scott from thefirenote.com, and I am hanging out in the prog corner, and today we are going to be talking about my favorite band and one of my least favorite albums from them. Well, at least traditionally, historically, it's been one of my least favorite albums from the band. Upon its release in 1978, I was so disgusted that I actually turned in my Yes fandom card. I dropped out. I was not a Yes fan anymore after that. That was a silly man. I was 16 years old. What did I know? But over the years, my opinion about this album has certainly softened. It has changed. It's not nearly as horrible as I thought it was. And I'm sure there's a lot of people out there who still harbor that opinion about this record. It's just not as good as its predecessor. I mean, Going for the One was such a great record. The vibes were cool. Rick was back in the band. Everybody was feeling it. They came out with a really nice record. They did a good tour. So now they're coming back for album number 9. And this would be the second album in a row with Rick Wakeman back in the band. This would be the second album in a row without Eddie Offord producing it, although he began the sessions. And we'll talk about that in a minute. And it's the second album in a row without Roger Dean's terrific artwork, which adorns the album covers behind me. But is it really a bad record? Well, there's a couple things about Tormato that are very obvious. First of all, there's no long songs. There's no Awaken, nothing like that. The Silent Wings of Freedom is the longest song on the album. It's only like 7.5. But the overall sound was so different on this thing. Rick Wakeman started using some of these new keyboards that he had invested in, the Polymoog and the Birotron. They sound weird. They don't sound great. Chris Squire was using a Rickenbacker harmonizer, so his bass sound is completely different than any other Yes album. They were working on something called the automatic doubling on Alan's drums. That doesn't really work that well. They sound funny. Steve Howe's guitar, he's using primarily a Les Paul on this album, and it doesn't sound the same. The tones are just weird. Being self-produced, I almost imagine 10 hands at the mixing bar. No, my keyboards need to be louder. No. And I'm sure a lot of that happened. What else happened was a lot of these songs began as demos, John and an acoustic guitar. So when they started tracking this thing out and they dropped the acoustic guitar out, everybody's like, wow, this really sounds empty. So in comes Steve, in comes Rick, I mean, a million notes a second to fill the void, and it's almost like they knew the material wasn't quite as good, so they were overcompensating a little bit, perhaps. I don't know. Another thing that happened was, like we talked about with Eddie Offord not being there, apparently he began the sessions, he tracked the basic tracks, and he used Dolby. But the engineers who came in after him were unaware of this, and as a result, the sound is very muddy, and it's just yet one of a plethora of reasons why Tormato is, really frowned upon in the Yes community and in the prog community as a whole. But I want to do a recap of this thing, because upon further review, Tormato isn't really that bad. I know, right? It really isn't. The album cover is terrible. Yeah. I mean, this went through a few different permutations. Originally, the band was going to call this the 11th Illusion, which is weird being that it's their 9th album. They were also going to do 2 parts to it. This would be part 1. Part 2 is going to be recorded in Barbados. John and Rick wanted to record this in Switzerland, where they recorded Going for the One. Steve and Chris wanted to stay in the UK, closer to home. Alan White, as usual, broke the tie, and they ended up recording half of this at Advision and the other half at RAK. The first time Yes had ever used multiple studios. And the net result is this thing right here, Tormato. Let's dive in a little deeper into these tracks and see where there is value, because there really is. There's actually some good stuff on here. Side 1 starts out with the Future Times Rejoice. I really like that track. I think it's got a nice uplifting feel to it. John's voice sounds great. There's a lot of those weird sounds that we talked about, but it's still a really, really strong track. The single comes up next, Don't Kill the Whale. Not 100% in love with it. It's okay. It's a little plodding, and it's not bad. Madrigal comes next, which is a really nice Rick Wakeman, John Anderson song. Really pretty, and yeah, I like that. But it's Release, that ends side 1. I love that song. I love the drum solo. I love the fake crowd noise. I just think it's a lot of fun. Obviously, this is 78. You've got the Ramones, you've got all these bands out there, the Clash, the Cars, the Jam, Blondie, Talking Heads. All these bands are doing all this really fun, interesting music. Yes, was obviously paying attention a little bit, right? Side 2 begins with Arriving UFO, and Rick Wakeman does this weird, alien soundscapes, which I guess John Anderson had just watched Close Encounters of the Third Kind and came up with these weird, alien-esque music and the lyrics to go with. It's just weird. It's all right, though. I really do enjoy it. Circus of Heaven was the song that I had a lot of problems with growing up, and one of the main reasons that when I got the cassette in 78, I threw it overboard. It's somewhere at the bottom of the sea between Puerto Rico and the Dominican Republic. I was a little harsh on it. It's actually not that bad. I think the thing that really turned me off was John Anderson's son at the end. It's just a little childish, and I didn't appreciate it. The beautiful Chris Squire penned Onward is next. This song is incredible. Probably the best thing Chris ever wrote. They played it in tribute to him in 2015 when they started touring without him for the first time, and had that spotlight on his Rickenbacker bass, and that song's going, and tears coming down the old eyeball. Pretty great. The album ends with On the Silent Wings of Freedom. A lot of people think it's the best track on the album. I think it's slightly overrated. It's fun. A lot of Squire noodling. Everybody's noodling. It's Tormato. Who am I kidding? The whole thing's just a disaster. It sounds weird, but for some reason, I kind of like it. The more I've listened to it over the last, 5 or 10 years, I'm finding a newfound appreciation for it. I know what they were trying to do. They were trying to square the circle. They were trying to be Yes, yet they were trying to find a new commercial lane that they could go down to do some interesting things. And hey, the spirit was willing. Perhaps the flesh was a little bit weak. The resulting tour, though, that end around tour, 1978, 1979, go back and check out some YouTube clips of Yes during that era. They were on fire. Tormato's not their best album, but the tour associated with the album was probably their best tour. There's some great stories about how, the stage is round and it's turning around, right? So how does the band get on stage? Well, they had these, a tube that they would go through and then up, and so I guess the roadies would sometimes take that tube and take them out to the parking lot, so the band would be thinking they're going up on stage, and hey, where is everybody? I don't know. That was obviously the last hurrah of the classic era. The division between the band was just getting worse and worse. They were going to be breaking up very soon after this. They tried to do another album in Paris, as everyone knows, the aborted Paris sessions, and then Yes was just no more. We know that wouldn't last because, drama was only a couple years away, and they were able to kind of reinvent themselves in the 80s with Owner of a Lonely Heart and all that. We know that story, but we're talking about it. Tormato. And upon further review, Tormato is not a bad record. It gets a bad rap, and the problem with Tormato primarily is going for the one, relayer, Tales from Topographic Oceans, Close to the Edge, Fragile, and the Yes album. If those 6 albums had never existed, we'd be talking about Tormato in a whole different way. It's just, by comparison, it pales, and that's obvious. But I really like it, and I hope this is going to inspire somebody to get out there and listen to the record with a fresh set of eyes. It's actually pretty damn good. Anyway, I am Scott from thefirenote.com. You are hanging out in the prog corner, and I will see you guys later.